Alright, hello everybody. Today I have for you another reading wrap up. This is books 126 through 130. Most of these I read for school. So there's that. But first up, reread, a lot of these are rereads. I reread Fever 1793 by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is one that I didn't actually end up teaching what is going to be for the 7th graders. Maybe I should have, maybe I still should next semester. But this is the story of a girl in the summer of 1793 when there's the yellow fever going on. And it's really fun to read in pandemic-y times. I mean, I read this back in August when things were still being taken slightly seriously. It's a very interestingly written book. Laurie Halse Anderson she's a very versatile writer, and she's very, very good at writing a lot of different things. And I do think that this is a very well done one. It's very, very interesting how she kind of gets into it. I don't know, it was one that I read when I was in like 5th grade, and I remembered it vaguely enough that rereading it, there were some bits and pieces that I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. But yeah, it was a decent time. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Something like that. Then I finished a book on my Kindle, Sisters in Love by Melissa Foster. I'll put up a picture. Okay, so this is a romance novel about this therapist who ends up falling in love with like one of her patients because it's a whole thing. Like, she runs into him at the coffee shop, and then he's talking to his friend. He's like, oh yeah, look, there's this attractive lady at the coffee shop, and then his friend ends up dying in an avalanche. And then he's like, I gotta go and figure out my commitment issues. And then it's the lady at the coffee shop, and then it's a whole thing. It wasn't as bad as I'm like making it out to be. It was okay. I mean, it's definitely not the worst book I read this year. That goes to a different Kindle book that I finished more recently. But it was just, I mean, I don't know why I read it. Like, I don't know why I keep kind of like picking up these like adult romances, because I don't care for them. You know, like I like, most of the time they're not like especially well written, and a lot of times like it's like I'm no prude. Like, I'm fine with the sex scenes, but they're not very interesting most of the time. It's just like, I don't know why I read it. It was okay, I guess. I mean, I think it was pretty cheap on Kindle. It might have even been free. I think that might have been why I downloaded it. But it was just like, I don't know. I don't know why I read it. I think I gave it like 3 stars. Like I said, it wasn't awful, but it just like wasn't super good. So that's what happened there. Then I read 1984 by George Orwell, another reread. But this is one that I read to teach to the juniors and seniors. Because in my school where I teach English, they put the juniors and seniors together. They're just split up into kids who go to the vocational center and kids who don't. But especially this year, most of these kids are at roughly the same place grade-wise anyway. Like, there's no real distinction between their abilities. So I just run exactly the same curriculum for both classes. But this is, of course, classic dystopian fiction about a world where there's just so much government oversight and so much control on the populace. It's an interesting one. It's a fun one. I think the first time I read this, I think I had just graduated high school. I know I didn't, because I never took I stopped taking high school English classes after my sophomore year of high school. I was taking college English classes after that. So I never read this in high school, like for a class. But this is the first time I've read it since I was high school age. And so it is very interesting to reread books like that later when you're older and have a little bit more opinions on things. But yeah, oh boy, it's just. This is a very well-written book, a very well-done book. I know a lot of people don't like it because of it, like very many other old dystopian novels written by men, does not treat women very well. But at some point, you just gotta either stop trying to read these books or just get over it. Like you gotta pick one. And I mean, I personally, as somebody who writes, I have like 8 books self-published, something like that. As somebody who writes, I try to read literally everything I can get my fucking hands on. That's why I keep reading all these romance novels, because like I want to have as broad of a spectrum of books I've read as I possibly can. Like I read nonfiction. My favorite genre is horror, but I'll read fucking anything. And so I think that if you're really trying to absorb all of the language and storytelling techniques that you can, you've got to kind of read everything. But I do enjoy this book. I mean, I think there's a reason why it's a classic. So yeah, I read this one. It was a good time. I think I gave it 5 stars. If not, I gave it 4 stars. Because it's a good time. I think the one like big classic dystopian that I have not yet read is I have not yet read Brave New World. I'm 99% sure it's in the book wall, so I have access to Brave New World. I just haven't read it yet, but I did reread this one. Then I reread another book to teach. That is The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier. I did film a full review on this one. That is no way similar to how I feel about this book. I fucking love The Chocolate War is one of my favorite books, okay? This is the story of a private Catholic high school in like Massachusetts or something like that, or New Hampshire, or New England, and it's their annual chocolate sale. This year, a boy named Jerry Renault says no, he doesn't want to sell the chocolates, and this is a giant chain reaction. It says a lot about kind of conformity and kind of disturbing the established order of things. It's a fantastic novel. I love it a lot. Like I said, though, I did film a full review on this one, so that will be up at some point. I don't know, but so I'm not going to say that much more. I do want to say, though, it's an older young adult novel. It's from like 1974, but it holds up so goddamn well. It's so quick and so easy to read, and every time I read it, I get a lot out of it every single time. So I would definitely recommend. 5 out of 5 stars, one of my favorites. And then finally, I read a book that was not to teach. It is, however, a book that was so hella relevant when I read it back in August, because I'm filming this in December now. Like, it's almost Christmas. It's December 22nd. I need to call the DMV. I have not. Obviously, I can't call it the DMV tonight because it's like fucking 7 p.m. But I need to during Christmas break, and I just avoided it today and yesterday because I don't want to argue with them anymore. I just want them to send me some fucking license plates. Anyway, I read Wanderers. This is by Chuck Wendig. This is Chuck Wendig's Plague book, and it came out in 2019. I'm very glad I waited until August of 2020 to read it. It wasn't on purpose. It was just because the book wall didn't give it to me. But basically, this is the story of like, there are 2 things going on. Well, there are really 3 things going on. 3 main things. There are a lot of things going on, but there are 3 main things. First up, like, a couple of people, certain people start just kind of sleepwalking, and they're just going, like, straight. And, like, nobody can stop. Like, if you try to physically stop them, they will literally explode. And so, like, that's the first thing that's happening. Secondly, there's a pandemic happening. And thirdly, there's just a huge, like, rush or insurgence of these, like, alt-right white supremacy groups. Reading this in August of 2020 was fucking terrifying. Like, let's keep playing. This is pre-election. Obviously, Biden hasn't been inaugurated yet, but at this point, it's like Donny Boy's on his last legs kind of deal. So right now, there's a little bit of a relief from that thing. Obviously, the virus isn't over yet, but this is when we didn't even know, like, when a vaccine was going to happen. Now people are starting to get a vaccine. So, like, right now there's a light at the end of the tunnel. When I read this in August, it was like, it's like we're in the Stand and we're in the Lincoln Tunnel scene, and this book was really just calling to so many things. Like, this was like the worst case scenario for everything is this book. And so it was like just the timing of this was impeccable. I did film a full review on this one, so if you want to hear more detailed thoughts, that is somewhere. Maybe, I don't know. But this was just, it was phenomenal, man. Like, I love Wendig's writing. I think he's got a really good sense of immediacy in all of his novels. I've read quite a few of his books at this point. I love the Heartland trilogy. I read his Atlanta Burns books. I read one of his Star Wars books, but I didn't read any of the other ones because I don't like Star Wars. I was just reading them for his writing. But I think that's all he's written. I read one of his, like, writing help books, but this one was, I still think the Heartland trilogy is my favorite of his works, but this was a very good one, and I would definitely recommend it. If it does, draw a lot of Stand comparisons, if you like The Stand, I would check it out. I mean, it is a good time. But yeah, like on the back here, we're seeing a bunch of comparisons to The Stand, but it's a great one. I do adore it. But I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I would not be surprised if it made it onto my top like books of the year list. Like it was a good time. So yeah, these are books 126 through 130 that I read this year. That is all for today. I will talk to you later, and goodbye.